The great dome of the Galactic Council chambers stretched impossibly high above the assembled delegates, its crystalline walls refracting the light of 1,000 worlds into dancing rainbows across the polished floor. Ambassador Veltar of the Zilithian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes and tried to suppress the amused clicking that threatened to escape his mandibles. Around him, representatives from 47 different species maintained the solemn decorum expected during official proceedings, but the undercurrent of barely contained mirth was unmistakable. "The motion before us today," announced Council Speaker Tequesis, her melodious voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic perfection, "concerns the application of the species known as humans for membership in our galactic alliance. The reviewing committee has compiled their findings." A low buzz of anticipation rippled through the assembled delegates. Veltar noticed how the Karathi delegation exchanged meaningful glances, their scaled faces betraying hints of amusement. Even the normally stoic Vanguard representatives seemed unusually relaxed, their typically rigid postures softened by what could only be described as confidence in the outcome. The massive viewing screen descended from the dome's apex, displaying humanity's home system in stark detail. Earth hung there like a blue-white marble, its single moon a pale companion against the cosmic darkness. To most species present, it looked remarkably ordinary, another garden world in a galaxy full of them. The human application was submitted 14 standard cycles ago. HYSS continued, her forearms gracefully manipulating the control interface. Their technological advancement places them at classification level 3.7, well within acceptable parameters. Their societal structure demonstrates basic cooperative principles. However, certain concerns have been raised. Committee Chairman Dexmore rose from his position among the elevated seats, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light like a prism. The Netherian species had been part of the Alliance for over 8,000 years, their reputation for thorough analysis unquestioned. When Dexmore spoke, his words carried the weight of institutional authority. "Esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice resonating with harmonic overtones that indicated formal address. "Our investigation into human society has revealed troubling patterns. While their technological capabilities are adequate, their behavioral history raises significant red flags regarding their suitability for Alliance membership." The chamber fell into attentive silence. Veltar leaned forward slightly, genuinely curious now. He had reviewed the preliminary reports himself, finding nothing particularly alarming about this bipedal species from the Outer Rim territories. "The humans," Dexmore continued, "demonstrate an unusual propensity for organized violence. Our sociological analysis indicates that in their recorded history of approximately 6,000 years, they have experienced only brief periods without active warfare somewhere on their planet. This level of sustained aggression is unprecedented among Alliance candidate species." A soft murmur arose from the delegates. The Zephyrian representative, her gossamer wings fluttering with what Veltar recognized as mild distress, spoke up. "Surely this is a developmental phase? Most species experience periods of conflict during their early civilization stages." "Indeed," Dexmore acknowledged, "which is why we conducted extensive comparative analysis. The average pre-spaceflight species experiences warfare approximately 12% of their recorded history. Humans have been engaged in active military conflict for roughly 94% of theirs." The numbers hung in the air like an uncomfortable truth. Veltar felt his amusement beginning to fade, replaced by something approaching concern. Still, the figures seemed almost absurdly exaggerated. "Furthermore," the chairman continued, "their weapons development has proceeded at an alarming rate. Within a single century, they advanced from chemical explosives to thermonuclear devices capable of rendering their entire planet uninhabitable. They have actually deployed such weapons against their own species." Now the discomfort in the chamber was palpable. The ethereal collective's representative, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering field matrix, pulsed with colors that indicated deep unease. Even species that had witnessed the rise and fall of stellar civilizations seemed disturbed by these revelations. "The committee's recommendation," Dexmore announced, his harmonic tones shifting to match the gravity of his words, "is immediate rejection of the human application, with a provisional ban on reconsideration for no less than 500 standard years. We believe this species requires extensive maturation before they can be trusted with the responsibilities that come with alliance membership. The vote was called with swift efficiency. 43 species voted in favor of the ban. Only 2 abstained, and none voted against. The decision was as overwhelming as it was predictable. As the delegates began to file out, their conversations already turning to other matters, Veltar noticed a lone figure seated in the observer's gallery. The human representative, Ambassador Chun Wei, according to the identification roster, had remained perfectly still throughout the entire proceeding. Her dark eyes held an expression that Veltar couldn't quite interpret, though something about her absolute stillness made his skin crawl with unexpected unease. The ban was official. Humanity would remain isolated in their corner of the galaxy, deemed too dangerous for civilized society. If only they had known what Chun Wei carried in her sealed diplomatic case. Ambassador Chun Wei waited until the last delegate had filed out of the main chamber before rising from her seat in the observer's gallery. The great dome had fallen silent except for the soft hum of environmental systems, its crystalline walls now reflecting only the pale light of distant stars. She moved with deliberate precision down the curved walkway, her footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. Speaker HFY remained at her podium, reviewing the session's official recordings with the detached efficiency that had made her species, the Lyrians, ideal mediators for galactic politics. Her 4 arms moved in practiced coordination across the control interfaces, but Chen noticed how her movements slowed as the human approached. Ambassador Wei, Tevas acknowledged without looking up, her melodious voice carrying a note of professional courtesy tinged with wariness. I trust you understand that the Council's decision was based on careful analysis. This is not personal judgment, but rather a rational response to statistical evidence. Chan interrupted, her voice calm but carrying an undertone that made Tevas finally look up. I understand completely. May I address the Council before the final records are sealed? HFY hesitated, her pale blue skin shifting to a slightly darker hue. A physiological response Chun recognized as uncertainty. The vote has been concluded, Ambassador. There are no provisions for last statements? I believe there are. Chen's smile held no warmth. Article 17 of the Alliance Charter guarantees any applicant species the right to respond to rejection, even if that response changes nothing. The speaker's skin shifted again, this time to the deeper blue that indicated resignation. Very well. I can reconvene the immediate council members. Chairman Dexmore has not yet departed, and several others remain in the building. 20 minutes later, a smaller group had assembled in the secondary chamber, still impressive with its soaring architecture, but more intimate than the Great Dome. 15 species were represented, including the most influential voices from the original vote. Chairman Dexmore occupied his elevated position with the same crystalline dignity as before, though Chan detected a subtle change in his posture that suggested impatience. Ambassador Wei, he began, his harmonic tones formal but clipped. While we respect your right to address the Council, I must emphasize that today's decision was unanimous among voting members. No new information is likely to alter. That depends, Chan said, placing a sealed case on the speaker's podium, on whether you consider the complete picture of human capability to be new information. A ripple of interest passed through the assembled delegates. Veltar, who had remained out of curiosity rather than obligation, leaned forward in his seat. The Karathi military attaché straightened from his previously relaxed posture. Chun activated the case's biometric locks with practiced movements. Your analysis focused on human conflict patterns and weapon development. These are indeed accurate statistics. What your investigation failed to uncover were the circumstances that shaped these patterns. The case opened with a soft hiss, revealing data crystals and a single, unremarkable metallic device no larger than Chen's palm. She lifted the device carefully, and several delegates instinctively shifted backward in their seats. This, she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, is a human weapon, not our most advanced, mind you, quite obsolete by current standards. but it represents something your peaceful species have never had to develop. Dexmoor's crystalline form shifted, light refracting differently through his exoskeleton. Ambassador, if you're attempting to intimidate, not intimidate, educate. Chen set the device down gently. This is a gravitational collapse initiator. Crude by our standards, it can only affect matter within a sphere roughly 10 kilometers in diameter. When activated, it creates a localized gravitational field approximately 1 million times standard Earth gravity. The chamber fell into absolute silence. Even the environmental systems seemed to quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The device you're looking at, Chun continued conversationally, can compress a small city into a sphere roughly the size of a marble. The compressed matter remains stable for approximately 47 minutes before the field dissipates, and the atomic structure explosively returns to normal dimensions. Veltar felt his mandibles click involuntarily. Beside him, the ethereal collective's representative pulsed with colors he had never seen before. Deep purples and violent reds that spoke of concepts beyond his understanding. Of course, Chen added, this is nothing compared to what we developed during the Void War. The what? The question escaped from speaker HFY before she could stop herself. Chen's smile was winter cold. The war you didn't find in your investigation. The one that doesn't appear in any human historical records because officially, it never happened. The war against an enemy that your alliance's most advanced scientific models insist cannot exist. She activated one of the data crystals, and the chamber's display screens came alive with images that defied comprehension. Vast geometric shapes moving through space with impossible precision. Fleets of human vessels that looked more like mobile cities than warships. And in the background, stars going dark one by one. The ban on humans isn't wrong, Chun said quietly, but it's not right for the reasons you think. We're not dangerous because we're warlike. We're dangerous because we had to become something else entirely in order to survive what was coming for us. The images continued to cascade across the screens, each more impossible than the last. And now, she whispered, it's coming for you. The data streams flowing across the chamber's screens defied every law of physics the assembled delegates thought they understood. Chun Wei stood motionless at the podium while impossible images played out above their heads. Human vessels the size of small moons engaging geometric entities that seemed to fold space around themselves like origami. Chairman Dexmoor's crystalline form had gone completely transparent, a physiological response his species exhibited only under extreme stress. These images, they cannot be authentic. Our deep space monitoring systems would have detected activities of this magnitude. Your monitoring systems, Chun replied with clinical precision, are designed to detect conventional matter and energy interactions. They're quite sophisticated for tracking normal spaceflight, stellar phenomena, and even exotic matter experiments. They're completely blind to dimensional phase variance. Veltar felt his understanding of reality beginning to crack around the edges. Dimensional what? The human ambassador gestured to the screens, where vast structures were simply appearing in empty space, not emerging from faster-than-light travel, but materializing as if reality itself was being rewritten. The enemy we call the architects don't exist in our dimensional framework. They manipulate spacetime like a construction material, folding reality to create temporary intersection points with our universe. A new voice spoke from the gallery, Admiral Kresh of the Hegemony Defense Force, her scaled features twisted with professional skepticism. Even if such beings existed, no single species could mount an effective defense against entities capable of manipulating spacetime itself. Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes grew colder. You're absolutely correct. A single species would be completely helpless. She activated another data crystal. That's why we stopped being a single species. The new images showed human figures, but wrong somehow. Too tall, moving with inhuman precision, their eyes reflecting light like mirrors, operating machinery that appeared to respond to thought rather than touch, standing in environments that should have been instantly lethal to organic life. Genetic optimization, Chun explained matter-of-factly. Neural interface integration, consciousness transfer protocols, selective breeding programs, artificial enhancement of reflexes, intelligence, and psychological resilience. The humans you investigated represent our baseline civilian population. The ones who fight the architects are barely recognizable as the same species. Speaker Tetris's skin had shifted to a pale gray that indicated deep shock. You're describing systematic self-modification on a scale that would require centuries of preparation. 843 years, to be precise. Chen's voice carried the weight of vast historical patience. The first architect incursion occurred in what you would call the year 1847 of our calendar. A minor probe, just a few geometric entities that appeared over our Pacific Ocean, scanned our planet for approximately 6 minutes, then vanished. But they left something behind. The screens shifted to show microscopic imagery, crystalline structures that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could process, growing through ordinary matter like cancer through living tissue. Dimensional seed material, Chun continued. It begins converting normal matter into architectures that exist partially in their dimensional framework. Left unchecked, it would have transformed our entire planet into a bridge point for full-scale invasion. Veltar's voice came out as barely a whisper. How did you stop it? We didn't. We learned to work with it. Chen's smile was the most terrifying thing any of the delegates had ever seen. The seed material responds to conscious direction when properly interfaced. It took us 40 years to develop the first successful human-machine dimensional hybrid consciousness. Another 60 to perfect mass production of enhanced individuals capable of existing partially in their dimensional space. The implications crashed over the chamber like a tidal wave. Admiral Kresh spoke first, her military training overriding her shock. You're saying humanity has been fighting an interdimensional war for over 8 centuries? Not fighting, balancing. Chun activated a final set of data streams. The architects aren't conquerors in any sense you would understand. They're gardeners. They cultivate reality itself, shaping it according to patterns we can barely comprehend. Every few thousand years, they return to previous cultivation sites to harvest what has grown. The screens now showed star maps spanning tens of thousands of light-years. Red markers indicated systems that had simply vanished from telescopic observation over the past millennia. The pattern was clear, a systematic harvesting of entire stellar regions, moving in predictable waves across the galaxy. Your alliance, Chun said quietly, exists within a cultivation zone. Every world you've colonized, every species you've contacted, every technological advancement you've achieved, all of it has been growing according to architect design. You are the crop. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even the building's environmental systems seemed to have stopped functioning, as if reality itself had paused to absorb the magnitude of what they were learning. The next harvest, Chun continued, is scheduled to begin in approximately 47 standard years. Your alliance has that long before the architects return to collect everything you've built, everything you've learned, everything you are. Chairman Dex Moore found his voice first, though it came out as barely a harmonic whisper. And humanity? Humanity volunteered to be the weeds, Chun replied. The unplanned growth that disrupts the cultivation pattern. We've spent 8 centuries becoming something the architects didn't design. Something that exists partially in their dimensional framework but follows completely different rules. She closed the data crystals and sealed them back in the case. The ban on human membership in your alliance is absolutely necessary. Not because we're violent or dangerous to you, but because associating with us marks you as contaminated crop. The architects would harvest you immediately rather than waiting for the scheduled collection. Veltar felt reality reassembling itself around this new understanding. Then why are you telling us this? Chun Wei's smile held no warmth, but for the first time, it held something approaching compassion. Because in 47 years, you're going to have a choice. Submit to harvest, or join us in the spaces between dimensions where the weeds grow wild. And if we refuse? The human ambassador was already walking toward the exit. Then we'll remember you fondly, she called back over her shoulder, and try to preserve some record of what you accomplished before the architect's return. The chamber remained silent long after she was gone. 3 hours after Ambassador Chunwei's departure, the emergency session of the full Galactic Council was the most heavily attended meeting in Alliance history. Word of the revelation had spread through the diplomatic quarters like wildfire, and representatives who had been preparing to depart for their home systems now filled every available seat in the Great Dome. Speaker HFY stood at her podium, her 4 arms working frantically to maintain order as voices rose in a dozen different languages across the chamber. The formal protocols that typically governed council sessions had dissolved into something approaching controlled chaos. The claims presented by the human representative, announced Chairman Dex Moore, his crystalline form now shifting through an entire spectrum of stress-related transparency changes, require immediate verification through our most advanced deep space monitoring systems. Admiral Kresh rose from her position among the military advisors, her scaled features set in grim determination. My staff has been analyzing the data crystals left by Ambassador Wei. The technological signatures are unprecedented. The energy patterns visible in those recordings exceed our theoretical maximum outputs by factors of several thousand. A new voice cut through the murmur that followed. Dr. Zephys of the Scientific Collective, her gossamer wings beating rapidly in agitation. More disturbing than the energy signatures are the dimensional readings. The quantum mathematics underlying those geometric entities suggest manipulation of fundamental spacetime constants. If authentic, these recordings document technology that shouldn't be possible under our current understanding of physics. Veltar felt the certainty of his worldview continuing to erode. Around him, species that had coexisted peacefully for millennia were displaying stress responses he had never seen before. The ethereal collective's representative was cycling through colors that indicated concepts beyond standard emotional spectrums. Even the normally unflappable Vanguard delegation appeared to be experiencing something approaching panic. The historical analysis presents additional concerns, continued Dr. Zephys, her voice carrying the careful precision of scientific training struggling with impossible data. We've been reviewing our long-term stellar observation records. The pattern of vanishing star systems that Ambassador Wei referenced is consistent with our observations. The chamber fell into a silence so complete that individual breathing patterns became audible. Speaker Tea struggled to maintain her composure, her skin shifting through progressively darker blues. How many systems? The question came from Counselor Thyron of the Inner Worlds, his normally steady voice cracking slightly. In the past 10,000 years, we have records of approximately 43 star systems that have simply disappeared from observation. No supernovae, no stellar collapse signatures, no debris fields. The stars and everything around them just stopped existing in any detectable form. The implications hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Veltar noticed how the various species were unconsciously clustering together, prey animals sensing predators beyond their comprehension. Admiral Kresh activated her personal communication device and spoke in rapid, clipped tones to her fleet commanders. The conversation was brief, but Veltar caught enough to understand that emergency deep space reconnaissance missions were being authorized. There's something else, Dr. Zephys continued, her wings now beating so rapidly they created a visible blur. The dimensional seed material that Ambassador Wei described, we found traces of it. The silence deepened impossibly. Microscopic quantities, embedded in the hulls of deep space exploration vessels, mining equipment, even some communication satellites. The crystalline structures match the imagery from the human data crystals exactly. It appears to be dormant, but it's everywhere, finished Chairman Dex Moore, his harmonic tones now carrying undertones of something approaching despair. Veltar's mind raced through the implications. If humanity's claims were accurate, then the Alliance wasn't just facing an external threat. They were already partially integrated into whatever transformation the architects had planned. The seed material represented contamination on a galactic scale. We need to contact the human government immediately, declared Ambassador Techuesis, her professional composure finally cracking. If they possess defensive capabilities against these architects, then we must negotiate. No. The voice belonged to General Krex of the Korathi Military Council, his usually jovial demeanor completely absent. If human claims are accurate, Then contact with them accelerates our contamination timeline. Ambassador Wei was quite specific. Association with humanity marks us as corrupted crop. Then what do you suggest? Demanded Counselor Thyron. We sit here and wait for harvest? The question sparked a renewed outbreak of multi-species argument. Veltar watched ancient alliances strain under pressure as different factions formed around impossible choices. Some delegates argued for immediate military preparation, others for diplomatic outreach, still others for evacuation protocols that would abandon their home systems entirely. Through the chaos, Veltar noticed something that chilled him more than any of the revelations they had received. Ambassador Qinwei had left one data crystal on the speaker's podium, a crystal they hadn't accessed yet. It sat there innocuously, no larger than his thumb, but something about its presence felt like a countdown timer ticking toward zero. There's still one data crystal, he announced, his voice cutting through the arguments with unexpected authority. The human ambassador left something else. The chamber gradually quieted as attention focused on the small device. Speaker Tegesis approached it with obvious reluctance, her skin now the deep blue of profound fear. Should we? She began. Yes, said Chairman Dex Moore, though his crystalline form continued its stress pattern shifting. If we're going to make informed decisions, we need all available information. HYSS activated the crystal with trembling movements. The chamber screens came alive with a single image, Earth viewed from high orbit, looking exactly as it had during the initial application review. Blue oceans, white clouds, the pale moon hanging in space nearby. But something was wrong. The image was too stable, too perfect. No weather patterns moved across the continents. No city lights sparkled on the night side. The planet looked like a museum exhibit rather than a living world. Then Chun Wei's voice filled the chamber, though she was nowhere to be seen. This is Earth as it exists today, her recorded message began. What you're looking at is humanity's greatest sacrifice for the war effort. Our homeworld has been completely converted to dimensional anchor technology. Every human who ever lived there has been relocated to mobile habitat platforms that exist partially outside normal spacetime. The camera angle shifted, revealing structures in Earth's orbit that defied comprehension. Geometric patterns that seemed to fold in on themselves, extending into dimensions the eye couldn't follow. We gave up our home, Chen's voice continued, to create a permanent disruption in the architect cultivation pattern. Earth now exists as a fixed point that prevents harvesting operations within a sphere roughly 50 light-years in diameter. The implications crashed over the assembled delegates like an avalanche. Humanity hadn't just been fighting the architects. They had been winning by sacrificing everything they had ever known. Your alliance space, the message concluded, falls within that protection zone. You have 47 years to decide what you're willing to sacrifice to help us expand it. The crystal went dark, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The emergency session had stretched through 2 full planetary rotations without break. The great dome that had once echoed with formal speeches and ceremonial protocols now resembled a war room, with delegates huddled in faction clusters around hastily established communication arrays and data analysis stations. Veltar rubbed his compound eyes, trying to clear the fatigue that made the chamber's crystalline walls seem to shimmer like a mirage. Around him, the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were struggling to comprehend a reality that had shifted so fundamentally that their entire understanding of existence required rebuilding from the ground up. Admiral Kresh stood at the central tactical display, her scaled features drawn with exhaustion as she reviewed reports from the emergency deep space reconnaissance missions she had authorized. The initial findings had only confirmed humanity's claims in the most disturbing possible ways. Scout Fleet Gamma has returned from the Void Sector, she announced to the assembled delegates, her voice carrying the flat tone of someone delivering terminal medical diagnoses. They found the remains of the Altarian system. A collective intake of breath swept the chamber. The Altarian civilization had been one of the Alliance's founding members, a species of crystalline beings renowned for their mathematical genius and architectural achievements. They had simply stopped responding to communications approximately 2,000 years ago. The star is still there, Admiral Kresh continued, but everything else is gone. Not destroyed, gone. The entire system has been replaced by geometric structures that exist partially in normal space and partially in somewhere else. Our sensors could barely detect them, and only because we now know what to look for. Dr. Zephys raised her gossamer wing for attention. The dimensional readings from the Scout fleet match the patterns in the human data crystals exactly. Whatever transformed the Alterian system is the same technology we're seeing in Ambassador Way's recordings. Chairman Dexmore's crystalline form had remained completely transparent for hours now, his stress levels pushing his species' physiological responses beyond their normal ranges. How many other systems have we lost without realizing it? Based on preliminary analysis, Dr. Zephys replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Potentially hundreds. Systems we assumed were simply beyond our communication range, or had chosen isolation, or had experienced natural disasters. The architect cultivation process appears to be far more advanced than Ambassador Way indicated. The weight of that revelation settled over the chamber like a burial shroud. Veltar felt his mandibles clicking involuntarily as he processed the implications. The Alliance hadn't just been unaware of an external threat. They had been systematically diminished by it for millennia without even noticing. Speaker THYSS approached the podium with movements that suggested she was carrying an enormous physical burden. Her forearms trembled slightly as she activated the communication systems. "I have received a priority transmission from Earth," she announced, her melodious voice now carrying harmonics of barely controlled terror. "Ambassador Way has requested permission to present additional evidence to the Council." More evidence? Councillor Thyron's normally composed demeanor had cracked completely, leaving him looking haggard and ancient. What could possibly be worse than what we've already learned? She didn't specify the nature of the evidence, THYSS replied, only that it concerns immediate defensive preparations for something called Harvest Acceleration Protocol. The phrase hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even without understanding its specific meaning, every delegate in the chamber could sense the malevolent implications. "Allow the transmission," ordered Chairman Dexmore, his harmonic tones now so distorted by stress that they barely qualified as speech. The chamber's main screen activated, displaying Ambassador Chun Wei in what appeared to be the command center of a human vessel. Behind her, Veltar could see figures that were definitely human in basic structure but wrong in ways that made his nervous system recoil. Too tall, too thin, their movements precise beyond organic capability, their eyes reflecting light with an inner illumination that suggested technological integration on a fundamental level. "Honored delegates," Chen began, her voice carrying the same controlled calm as before, "I bring unfortunate news. The architect monitoring systems have detected your investigation into their activities. They consider this evidence of crop contamination beyond acceptable parameters." The enhanced humans behind her moved with synchronized precision to control interfaces that seemed to respond to thought rather than physical manipulation. The technology they were operating looked like it had been grown rather than built, with organic curves that suggested dimensional manipulation on a scale that made Veltar's perception hurt. "The harvest timeline," Chun continued, "has been accelerated. Instead of 47 years, you now have approximately 16 months before full-scale collection operations begin in your space." Panic erupted across the chamber. Delegates who had maintained diplomatic composure through revelations that shattered their understanding of reality finally broke under the weight of immediate, personal extinction. Multiple species began attempting to establish emergency communications with their home governments simultaneously, creating a chaos of overlapping transmissions and desperate voices. However, Chen's voice cut through the chaos with knife-like precision. "We are prepared to offer immediate defensive integration to any species willing to undergo the necessary modifications." The chamber fell silent with shocking suddenness. "The process," she continued, "requires voluntary submission to genetic optimization, neural interface installation, and consciousness transfer protocols. The enhanced individuals would be capable of existing partially in architect dimensional space, making them invisible to harvest operations." Chairman Dexmore found his voice first. "What percentage of our populations could be processed in 16 months? Chen's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes grew colder. "With full cooperation and unlimited resources, We estimate approximately 12%. Priority would be given to individuals with technical skills, genetic diversity factors, and psychological resilience profiles. The mathematics were simple and horrible. 12% meant abandoning 88% of every alliance species to whatever the architects considered harvest. The alternative, Chen added before anyone could voice the obvious objection, is total extinction. The architects don't leave anything behind when they collect mature cultivation zones. Veltar stared at the screen and realized he was looking at the face of their only salvation, and their guaranteed destruction. Humanity offered survival, but only for a tiny fraction of those who needed saving. They offered hope, but only by accepting a transformation that would make them no longer recognizable as their original species. How long? He heard himself asking. Do we have to decide? Ambassador Chun Wei's smile was winter incarnate. You have until my ship reaches the outer beacon of your capital system. Approximately 72 hours. After that, we return to the spaces between dimensions and leave you to face the harvest alone. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in absolute silence. 71 hours and 37 minutes after Chun Wei's ultimatum, the Great Dome of the Galactic Council chambers had been transformed into something resembling a refugee camp. Delegates slept at their stations, sustained by emergency rations and stimulants, as they coordinated the most desperate logistics operation in galactic history. Veltar stood before the massive tactical display that now dominated the chamber's center, watching real-time updates stream in from 47 different star systems. The numbers were staggering and heartbreaking in equal measure. Of the Alliance's total population of approximately 2.8 trillion sentient beings, the emergency evacuation protocols had managed to relocate roughly 180 million to designated collection points. Less than 7%. Not even close to humanity's promised 12% survival rate. The Hegemony Defense Force has completed final population transfers from the outer colonies, reported Admiral Kresh, her scaled features now showing the gray pallor of complete exhaustion. We're at maximum capacity for transport ships, but we're still leaving behind. She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone in the chamber knew the numbers. They had been living with them for 3 sleepless days. Chairman Dexmore materialized beside the display, his crystalline form flickering between transparency and opacity as his species' stress responses fluctuated beyond their normal parameters. Any word from the human ship? Long-range sensors detect them holding position at the outer beacon. HYSS replied from her communications station. No movement, no additional transmissions. They're waiting. Dr. Zephys looked up from her analysis station, her gossamer wings now hanging limp with fatigue. I've completed the projections for species survival rates post-modification. Even assuming perfect success with the enhancement process, we're looking at approximately 340 million individuals who would retain enough original genetic material to potentially restore their species populations over multiple generations. The mathematics of extinction. Veltar found himself wondering if there was a special branch of mathematics dedicated to calculating the bare minimum requirements for species survival. If not, there would be soon. Time remaining? Asked Counselor Thyron, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer would be terrible. 14 minutes, HFY replied. 14 minutes to make a decision that would determine whether galactic civilization continued to exist in any recognizable form, or whether it simply ended altogether. The chamber's emergency communication system activated with a priority override signal that made every delegate jump. Ambassador Chun Wei appeared on the main screen, but she was no longer alone. Behind her stood representatives of species that Veltar didn't recognize. Beings that might once have been humanoid but had been modified so extensively that their original forms were barely discernible. Honored delegates, Chun began. I present the Collective Council of Enhanced Species, former members of the Draconic Alliance, the Silicon Confederacy, and the Ethereal Dynasties. Each chose modification over extinction when the architects came for their cultivation zones. One of the beings stepped forward, tall, angular, with skin that seemed to shift between metallic and organic states. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that existed in frequencies Veltar's ears weren't designed to perceive. We understand your fear, it said, the translated words somehow carrying emotional weight that transcended language barriers. The choice you face is the same one we confronted. Remain as you are and face certain annihilation, or become something new and preserve the essence of what you were. Another figure joined the first, this one clearly once belonging to an insectoid species, but now incorporating technological elements that seem to grow from its exoskeleton like living metal. The process is not comfortable, it admitted. You will lose much of what you consider fundamental to your identity. But consciousness survives. Memory survives. The core of what makes each species unique finds new expression in enhanced form. Veltar felt the chamber's attention focusing on him and realized he had unconsciously moved to the speaker's position. As the senior diplomat present, the burden of response had fallen to him by default. If we refuse? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Chun Wei's expression remained unchanged, but the enhanced beings behind her shifted with movements that suggested grief beyond normal emotional parameters. Then we maintain records of your civilizations in our archives, she replied. We preserve what knowledge we can, and we remember you existed. It's the only immortality we can offer. The weight of that statement settled over the chamber like a final judgment. Veltar looked around at the assembled delegates. Representatives of species that had existed for tens of thousands of years, civilizations that had created art and literature and scientific discoveries that had enriched the galaxy beyond measure. All of it would be reduced to archived memories in human databases. Time remaining? He asked quietly. 8 minutes, Thesis replied, her voice barely audible. The chamber fell into a silence that felt like the pause between a lightning flash and the thunder that follows. Veltar could hear individual breathing patterns, the soft hum of communication devices, the distant vibration of the building's structural supports. Normal sounds of life continuing, oblivious to the cosmic deadline counting down around them. Dr. Zephy spoke first, her gossamer wings fluttering with what might have been resignation or determination. The scientific collective votes for modification. We choose survival over species purity. The Hegemony Defense Force concurs, added Admiral Kresh, her military training overriding the emotional turmoil visible in her scaled features. Death with honor is still death. Our duty is to our people's survival. One by one, the delegates announced their species' decisions. The mathematics were grimly simple. Every species that chose modification would sacrifice roughly 90% of their population to save the remaining 10%. Every species that refused would sacrifice 100%. When the votes were tallied, 41 species had chosen modification. 6 had chosen extinction rather than transformation. The decision wasn't unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Very well, Chun Wei said when Veltar announced the final tally. Modification ships are already en route to your collection points. The process will begin immediately. Wait, Counselor Thyron interrupted, his voice cracking with the weight of what they had just agreed to. What happens to us afterward? Where do the enhanced populations go? For the first time since her initial appearance, Chun Wei's controlled expression showed something approaching emotion. You join us in the spaces between dimensions. Your enhanced populations will help us expand the protection zones around unconverted star systems. You become part of the resistance that keeps the architects from achieving total galactic dominance. And if we succeed? Veltar asked. If we somehow find a way to defeat them permanently? The enhanced beings behind Chun exchanged glances that suggested communication on levels beyond normal perception. The former draconic representative stepped forward, its metallic organic skin shifting through color patterns that might have been its species' equivalent of a smile.